These players were supposed to be franchise saviors and foundational pieces. Instead, they ended up being coach killers and lost causes. These are the biggest NFL draft busts of the 2010s. Starting with Mitch Trubisky, whose biggest crime was not being Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. That trio led the quarterback class in the 2017 NFL draft, and somehow the Bears thought Trubisky was the safest option. So much so, they traded 4 picks to the 49ers to move up 1 spot to 2nd overall. But why did the Bears GM Ryan Pace settle on Trubisky? Well, he had the measurables at 6'2", 220 with a 4.67 40-yard dash, and in his 1 season as a starter at North Carolina, Trubisky had good production with 35 total touchdowns. But what really made Pace, a former Saints exec, fall in love with Trubisky was that he saw a lot of Drew Brees in him and looked past the glaring red flags. At UNC, Trubisky's supreme athletic ability overshadowed his inconsistency, so there were always questions of if he could master the mental part of the game. And there were also doubts about his leadership ability. Those suspicions were confirmed almost as soon as Trubisky entered the NFL. The Bears coaches saw that he wasn't ready as a passer, so he started his rookie season on the bench. It wasn't until week 5 that they decided to make him the starter, replacing Mike Glennon. And in 12 games, Trubisky threw as many interceptions as touchdowns, while averaging just 6.6 yards per attempt. Chicago finished the year 5-11, and head coach John Fox was fired. The funny part is that the Bears hired Matt Nagy from the Chiefs, who was part of the regime that drafted Mahomes 10th overall. And Trubisky did improve under Nagy, but he never became a guy who could win games with his arm. He never toughened up either. He couldn't keep his emotions in check on the field and let outside criticism affect him a lot. During a rough stretch in 2019, the team turned off the TVs in Hallis Hall to improve the vibes. Chicago eventually declined Trubisky's 5th-year option, and his Bears run ended with a loss to the Saints in the 2020 wildcard round. But at least Trubisky lasted 4 seasons in Chicago, because the next player on this list barely got 1 season with the team that drafted him. Trent Richardson was a stud at Alabama. In 2011, he gained more than 2,000 yards from scrimmage and scored 24 total TDs as the Tide won the Natty. But was he good enough to go 3rd overall to Cleveland, who traded 4 picks to the Vikings to move up 1 spot? In hindsight, obviously not. But even at the time he got drafted, there were signs that picking him that high was a risk. He got his knee scoped 2 months before the draft and needed another scope during training camp. Then, during the season, he cracked his ribs. To Richardson's credit, he played through the pain and finished his rookie year with 950 yards and 11 touchdowns. But his decline was already underway. Cleveland changed coaches in the offseason, from Pat Shurmur to Rob Chudzinski, and the new regime didn't like what they saw from Richardson. So, 2 weeks into the 2013 season, the Browns made a shocking move. They traded Richardson to the Colts for a first-round pick in the 2014 draft, and that deal turned out to be bad for both sides. Richardson kept regressing, and then he got suspended from the 2014 AFC title game after missing a walkthrough without telling the team. Just a few weeks later, the Colts released him. He signed with the Raiders, but after more health issues, was cut from camp in 2015. In 2016, the Ravens gave him another shot, but then another knee issue surfaced, and Baltimore cut him in camp. His final years of ball were spent trying to prove he should be in the NFL, spending time in the CFL, the AAF, and even a league in Mexico. But no team brought him back. As for the Browns' end of the trade, somehow the outcome was worse because they used the first-round pick the Colts gave them to trade up and draft Johnny Manziel. Now, going into the 2014 draft, the Browns were coming off 6 straight losing seasons. They recently hired another new coach in Mike Pettin, and they were desperate for some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. So, with an extra first-round pick from the Trent Richardson trade, why not take a chance on a big-name Heisman Trophy-winning quarterback, right? Wrong, because Johnny Football had issues. Manziel lit up college football with his wild improvisation ability and crazy throws at Texas A&M. And in 2012, he became the first freshman to win the Heisman Trophy. But from that moment on, his life off the field was a mess. He became a mega star, constantly seen partying with celebrities, courtside at NBA games, and spending copious amounts of money before NIL was a thing. His money fingers gesture hit differently after that. But Manziel left College Station after the 2013 season so he could go to the NFL and make money legally. So, where do you send a larger-than-life athlete who loves partying and fame? Cleveland, as the Browns moved up 4 spots to take him 22nd overall. Manziel might have even become decent with some effort, but he hated the city and hated the grind that came with being an NFL quarterback. He admitted in a 2023 Netflix documentary that he watched 0 film with the Browns.
Their GM's calling me going, he doesn't watch tape. I'm like, well, he's got to watch some tape. It's like, EB, his iPad hours is 0.00.
Zero.
And was even seen partying in Vegas the night before a game. By February of 2016, Manziel's agent dropped him as a client. And as of March of 2016, Cleveland released him. After his time in the NFL, he was driven into a deep depression and struggled with addiction. In 2018, he attempted a comeback in the CFL, but football still wasn't a priority. His NFL career consisted of 14 games. He threw as many interceptions as touchdowns while completing just 57% of his passes and going 2-6 as a starter. But the Browns had 2 first-rounders in 2014 because of the Richardson trade. So what did they do with the other pick? Well, they'd have been better off giving it away because they took another bust, Justin Gilbert. He went 8th overall, 14 picks before Johnny Manziel. For context, Odell Beckham Jr. went 12th overall, Aaron Donald went 13th, and Zach Martin went 16th. But like Manziel, Gilbert had a poor work ethic. His own teammates called him out publicly for being immature, and in 2015, he was even suspended for a game for being late to a team meeting. He caused problems off the field too. In 2015, he drove his car into a ditch in a road rage incident, and in 2016, the Browns gave up on him after 2 seasons. Just like they did with Manziel, they traded Gilbert to the arch-rival Steelers. Pittsburgh cut him after 1 season. And then the NFL suspended him for a year for violating the substance abuse policy. Gilbert never returned to the league after that. And never has a team royally botched the first round of a draft as bad as the Browns did in 2014. But sometimes a team drafts the right player and they just run into bad luck, like Robert Griffin III. RG3's rookie season was truly something special. In the 2012 draft, Washington traded 4 picks to move up from 6th to 2nd, and it wasn't long before the 2011 Heisman Trophy winner was running the offense in the nation's capital. He and the Shanahans changed the quarterback position in the NFL with their read option attack. As a first-year starter, Griffin threw for 3,200 yards and ran for 815. He also beat out Andrew Luck, the first pick of the 2012 draft, for AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. But this is where the bad luck comes in. In Week 14, Griffin suffered a knee injury against the Ravens. And if that was all that had happened, he may not have been on this list. But Griffin returned to the game for a few snaps before being removed. Afterward, there was controversy over whether he was actually cleared to go back in. Washington's team doctor, legendary orthopedic surgeon Dr. James Andrews, said Griffin didn't let him examine his knee on the sideline right away. Then, after missing the next game, Griffin was back for Week 16. Under his leadership, Washington made the playoffs. But then came the biggest mistake of RG3's career. During Washington's wildcard game against Seattle, he tried to field a bad snap late in the 4th quarter. Unfortunately, his leg bent the wrong way as he chased after the ball, and he tore both his ACL and LCL. Washington head coach Mike Shanahan took a ton of heat for letting RG3 play on a bad knee, but Griffin accepted some responsibility too, saying he accepted the risk of playing injured. The relationship between the two was never the same. Griffin struggled in his 2nd year before getting hurt more, and then was replaced by Kirk Cousins. He lasted 4 seasons in D.C. before signing with the Browns in 2016. Just a year later, he was cut by Cleveland, and he finished his career with the Ravens, serving as a backup and mentor to Lamar Jackson. And speaking of players whose careers were derailed by injuries, we present to you Kevin White, who flashed bust potential early, as in right after he was drafted 7th overall by the Bears in 2015. During OTAs his rookie year, he suffered a season-ending stress fracture in his leg. In 2016, he was done after 4 games because of a high ankle sprain and fractured fibula. Then, in 2017, he didn't even get past Week 1 after breaking his scapula going over the middle. 3 season-ending injuries in as many seasons. White's career was toast. In his one healthy season, 2018, the Bears sealed the deal. They brought in Taylor Gabriel and benched White. White finished that year with 4 catches for 92 yards. He actually played 3 more seasons, jumping from Arizona to San Francisco to New Orleans. But he kept missing time with injuries. Finally, in 2022, the Saints cut him during camp with an injury settlement. I mean, it's only right that he went out like that. His career numbers totaled 30 games, 28 receptions, 397 yards, and 0 touchdowns. But it didn't take injuries to ruin the career of Josh Rosen. He did that all by himself. Josh was never really all in on football, which was a fear many teams had about him going into the draft. He had lots of interests outside the game, including science and economics. economics. And he definitely got the economics of football right, because Rosen supplied just enough good play at UCLA to demand NFL teams make him a first-round pick. And in 2018, the Cardinals did just that, selecting Rosen 10th overall. He was the 4th QB taken in the draft, behind Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and Josh Allen. And yes, Rosen was the worst of the 4. He struggled with accuracy, reads, and pocket presence. You know, all the stuff that makes quarterbacks good, finishing his rookie season with 11 touchdowns and 14 picks. The Cards finished the year 3-13, so that offseason they changed coaches. And unfortunately for Rosen, the new guy, Cliff Kingsbury, wanted his own QB. So with the first pick of the 2019 draft, Arizona selected Kyler Murray, and out went Rosen to the Dolphins in a day 2 trade. In 2019, Rosen made 3 starts for Miami after Ryan Fitzpatrick was benched. He went 0-3, threw 3 interceptions, and was sacked 12 times. And that was it for him. In 2020, Miami cut Rosen a few months after drafting Tua Tagovailoa. Josh would spend 1 more year as a backup for Matt Ryan in Atlanta before being out of the league. But we can't talk about busts from the 2018 draft without also mentioning Sam Darnold. When Darnold entered the league, he just wasn't ready for the NFL. He had played just 2 seasons at USC and was only 20 years old. Still, the Jets traded 3 second-rounders to move up 3 spots and select Sam 3rd overall. In week 1 of his rookie year, Darnold was named the Jets starter. His debut was on a Monday night against the Lions in Detroit. And how did Darnold announce his arrival? He threw a pick-6 on his first play from scrimmage. He ended up playing decently in a Jets blowout win, but Jets Nation had been introduced to the Sam Darnold experience. So where did it go wrong for him? Well, maybe it was when he got mono in his 2nd season.
They told me I had mono, and I immediately started laughing, thought they were joking.
And ESPN posted an update that turned into a legendary meme. There was no coming back from that. Or maybe it was a certain Monday night game against the Patriots. Darnold was caught on a hot mic saying he was seeing ghosts.
Seeing ghosts.
Says Bill Belichick blitzed him into oblivion. No coming back from that either. A year later, the Jets were done with the inconsistent play Darnold was giving them. He was 13-25 as a starter and threw 39 interceptions. So, in the 2020 offseason, New York traded him to a desperate Panthers team for picks. Darnold's struggles continued in Carolina, but he did beat Gang Green in a revenge game. In 23, he signed with the Niners to back up Brock Purdy, and this year, he joined the Vikings, where he'll get another shot as a starter. But while Darnold has managed to carve out a decent career for himself as a journeyman, Justin Blackmon lasted just 2 years before making a shocking exit from the NFL. Blackmon balled out at Oklahoma State. His last 2 years with the Cowboys, he posted a combined 233 receptions for 3,304 yards and 38 touchdowns. However, off the field, Blackmon was fighting demons. His drinking and drug use were spiraling out of control, and a DUI arrest his sophomore year brought it out into the open. But Justin was allowed to keep playing, the charges were later reduced, and he didn't have any more legal issues in college, so his draft stock didn't take a hit. And when the 2012 NFL Draft rolled around, Blackmon was rated as the top wideout prospect. After the Jaguars moved up to take him 5th overall, he was expected to be an instant star. But then his past issues emerged again. In June 2012, he was arrested again for a DUI. And before he even played a game, Blackmon was in the NFL's substance abuse program. Despite that, he had a decent rookie season with 64 catches for 865 yards and 5 touchdowns. But even his success couldn't help him shake his addiction. Blackmon violated the drug policy again, and in 2013, he was suspended for the first 4 games of the season. Another violation during the season got him suspended indefinitely.
This is a kid that's had so many chances that really hasn't been able to turn it around. And once in a while, guys, you run out of chances.
And here's where the story takes the weirdest turn. Blackmon never applied for reinstatement. He ghosted everyone. After another DUI arrest, it became clear that he disappeared back to Oklahoma. But still, no one knows the full story. However, it didn't take much legwork to figure out that the next player on this list was going to struggle to live up to his draft position. In 2019, the Raiders reached for Clelin Ferrell when they took him 4th overall. He was an excellent pass rusher at Clemson, but he wasn't a top 5 prospect. The John Gruden, Mike Mayock-led Raiders thought he was, and then Ferrell showed right away that he wasn't. He had 4.5 sacks in 15 games as a rookie, then 2 sacks in 2020, 1.5 sacks in 2021, and 2 sacks in 2022. That's 10 total sacks in 4 seasons. By the time Farrell left the Raiders as a free agent in 2023, Gruden and Mayock were long gone. So why didn't Farrell work out for the Raiders? Part of it was that he looked better in college than he actually was. He played in a loaded Clemson defense. Guys like Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins played with him on the D-line. Wilkins went to the Dolphins 9 picks after the Raiders took Farrell. And so, Farrell is a warning to teams that want to reach for talent. But sometimes, teams just fall in love with a player, especially if that player has elite speed. And John Ross had that in spades. In 2017, Ross became a draft legend with his then combine record 4.22 40-yard dash time. The Washington wideout broke Chris Johnson's 2008 record by 2/100ths of a second and skyrocketed up the draft boards. The Bengals ended up taking Ross with the 9th overall pick. They already had A.J. Green and Brandon LaFell, but Ross's speed would add an entirely new element to their offense. However, Ross barely saw the field as a rookie. A preseason knee injury and an in-season shoulder injury kept him on the sideline. He took just 17 offensive snaps and caught no passes in 3 games. After a modest 2018 season, he was showing out at the start of the 2019 season. He had a big week 1 and was contributing in every game. Then came the injury that wrecked his career and almost ended his life. In week 4, Ross took a hit from Steelers corner Joe Hayden. The tackle caused a shoulder sprain, which might not sound too bad at first. However, after a couple tests, a doctor told Ross that a joint in his chest came very close to severing an artery. Ross might have missed 8 weeks, but he avoided a tragedy. Unfortunately for Ross, the injuries never stopped, and he finished his career with just 62 catches for 957 yards and 11 touchdowns. If you enjoyed this video, stick with Blitz, subscribe, and never miss another.